In Nigeria, we have resigned ourselves to fate. And we have a classic response that summarizes the depth of our helplessness. It is well. Or it go better. And you see, when we mouth these platitudes, it's not as if we truly expect that things are going to change. It's that we have accepted the abnormal. It's a classic case of learned helplessness. In the late 60s and early 70s, a researcher, Martin Sleeman, right, was conducting some experiments at the University of Pennsylvania. The experiments were on classical conditioning. So what he did was that he got some dogs and was applying electrical charges on them, uncontrollable electrical charges. Now, over time, the dog stopped fighting back. He then applied the same uncontrollable electrical charges to dogs that did not have that experience, and all of them were fighting back. So he was thinking. He then transferred the experiment to human beings. He didn't apply electrical charges on human beings, right? So he used loud noises. And he realized from that experiment that when creatures or human beings or animals find themselves in an uncontrollable, when they can no longer control an outcome, they stop trying. That is the origin of learned helplessness. Now, back to our situation. We have found ourselves in this form of learned helplessness, and because we can no longer control our outcomes. But that alone, if that was just the case, it would have been bad enough. But we've now seen that any time we find anything that's remotely normal, we become paranoid and apprehensive. How many of us get worried when we have more than 48 hours of power supply? Have just 2 days of power uninterrupted in Nigeria, you begin to look at your light bulb suspiciously. Now, the tragedy in this logic is that we have even come to accept that if the power holding company realizes that in their error, they have given us more than our fair power supply, they will switch off the power, and then the power will never have electricity again. It is well is the story of learned helplessness, accepted abnormalities, and is a tragedy of Nigeria. Today, Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. In the whole wide world, 10.5 million out-of-school children as at December 2018. 1 in every 5 out-of-school children in the world is a Nigerian. 10.5 million children can fill the 30,000 capacity Godswill Akpabio Stadium, that new stadium, 340 times over. That's the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria today. Yet, it is well. How many of us stood with France when 131 people, innocents, were killed in the St. Denis terrorist attacks? I know that a number of us recalled with terror when over 51 people were killed in the Christchurch, New Zealand mosque shootings. Yeah. We all recalled with horror. We stood with France. We stood with Netherlands. But back home, in our backyard in Nigeria, between October 19, 2018 and March 16, 2019, about 350 people were killed by purported herdsmen and bandits in just one state. This is statistics for one state in the 36 states of the Federation, Kaduna State. According to the Nigerian Security Tracker, between September 2018 and September 2019, 3,027 people, Nigerians, were killed by Boko Haram alone in about 199 incidents. Nigeria's estimated maternal mortality rate is about 800 deaths for every 100,000 live births. Of the 46 most developed countries in the world, the total, this was in 2015, so in 2015, same 2015, of the 46 most developed countries in the world, the total maternal deaths was 1,700. When it comes to ratios, that gives you about 12 maternal deaths for every 100,000 births, compared to Nigeria's 800 deaths for every 100,000 live births. If you further break it down, it means that every single day, about 159 women die during childbirth or due to pregnancy-related complications in Nigeria. I want to give us an analogy that we'll take with us. 160 people, maybe a commercial jet should be able to contain about 160 people. What it means that what we are doing in this country is that every day we pack 160 pregnant women into a commercial jet and crash it into the ocean. Every single day. We crash one today, crash one tomorrow, crash one next tomorrow, till we complete 365 days in a year and we start all over again. Yet we say it is well. We are now the poverty capital of the world. I realized a couple of speakers had mentioned that at 94.47 million people living below the poverty line, we have overtaken India, a country with 7 times our population, as the poverty capital of the world. But there's an interesting part of this poverty capital thing with Nigeria. Okay, first of all, every minute in Nigeria, 4.5 people slide into abject poverty in Nigeria. Every single minute. So if earlier this year there were about 47% of us living in abject poverty, trust me that by December we will have exceeded 50% of our population living in abject poverty. Now, the interesting thing about poverty in Nigeria is that we actually don't reserve ourselves to fate like that and just go with the it is well. That's not just the thing. In Nigeria, we are split into 2 camps. There is the I must blow camp, and there is the no more free money for looters camp. Now, so for the I must blow camp, their desire to excel may make them excel both in positive and negative ways. I mean, these days, excelling is to immigrate. Positive is you immigrate legally to Europe. Negative is that you decide to go the Sahara route, or you brave the Mediterranean Sea. So for these people, we ask ourselves, why do they do this? But we think that the terror of what their past has done to them has given us a distorted view of the future. So today, people will steal, rob, do all sorts of things just to escape poverty. We have so normalized poverty. We see it every day. We have accepted it, that it has become part of us. The problem with that is that this mass of impoverished people will perceive the few successful ones as those who have taken their rightful place in society. So the price that the successful ones will have to pay is that every day, they and their dependents will be singled out as a symbol of the looters class, to be kidnapped, for ransom, tortured, butchered, and killed. So it's important that we understand how we got here, how we got to the point where we normalize this level of abnormality. For me, I had a road to Damascus moments, right? And I would like to share with you 3 different road to Damascus moments that made me realize that for me to clean my body, I need to understand where the rain began to beat me. In 2011, late 2011, I was appointed the managing director and CEO of a bank in Zambia. And coming from the high-octane charged Nigerian banking industry, when I got to Lusaka, I felt that my colleagues were laid back. I felt that they were lazy. I felt that they were not aggressive enough. It took me about 1 month to realize that it was me that had the problem. They were actually looking at me as if I was a madman. You know, by 1600 hours, which for them is 4 p.m., everybody is thinking of going home, right? By 1800, I'm still working. You are the only one working. And you can imagine where in a society like the banking industry in Nigeria, where some people will be working up until 2400, which is their midnight. By 1600, your staff will tell you, I want to knock off. Knock off is that they want to close. If you keep them, you will get a summons from the regulator or the Minister of Labor. Now, so for me, this is a small African country, and I'm wondering how the Minister of Labor is so involved in what you do with your staff. But I was coming from the position of my normalized abnormality. The second experience was when I moved to Rwanda as the deputy managing director of a bank. It was in the run-up to a quarterly audit, and I was having a conversation with the audit partner. And I was trying to explain a point to him, a practice which was very normal for me back in Nigeria. It was only when his face dropped in bewilderment and horror that all my education rushed back. And I realized that this thing that is almost standard operating procedure that we have in Nigeria can potentially be interpreted as a fraud. The third situation, the third road to Damascus moment, was when my wife was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. Prior to then, anytime I was always busy, anytime they call me, maybe I'm in the office, I'm in a lot of meetings, I'll say, let me call you back. Let me call you back. And for the first time in my life, I realized that there were some things more important than that meeting where I tell my family, let me call you back. Let me call you back. I realized that I had to spend a bit more time creating legacies than pursuing pecuniary needs. Now, so yeah, all of you must be wondering, where is all this headed? Stop the average Nigerian on the road today and ask the person the problem in our society. You realize that that individual believes that the problem is caused by every other person than himself. The individual is never part of the problem. Now, in business ethics, there is a term for it. It's called ethical blindness. You know, when somebody is describing a car accident and tells you, I was just driving on my own, I was just driving, and that car came out of nowhere and hit me. The car did not materialize out of thin air now. The car was there. It was in your blind spot. You just didn't see it. So the problem with these things that take time to build, we just normalize them over time, is that after a while, you no longer realize that they are there. And then one day, it just hits you, bam, and it becomes a crisis. So over time, we've had practices, we have behavioral attitudes that we have simply normalized, we think is okay, and then one day we just wake up, and it becomes a crisis. So how do we change these things? What am I proposing? I have a theory of oasis of excellence. I believe all of us know what an oasis is. So in the desert that's arid, there is this small area where you have life, water, etc. So regardless of what we say is happening around you, and I know it's difficult, in whatever space you find yourself in, make it an oasis of excellence. Whether it's in a WhatsApp group, whether it's in your family, whether it's in your estate meeting, in a school or university, or whether it's even in this forum. All those practices that you have learned over time, you understand this international best practice that have rigor, insist that those will be the minimum standards in the place you operate. Do not compromise on those standards. And I can tell you something, it's not an easy thing to do. When I came back from Rwanda in 2017, one of the first things I told myself was, I called a meeting of all my senior people, because then I came back to a bank in Nigeria and I was in charge of the South-South, of the business banking arm. So I called all my senior people and I told them, from today, I want you to be respectful when you talk to your colleagues. I want you to show empathy. I do not want to hear that you shout on any of your colleagues. I want you to first treat them as human beings before you even begin to treat them as colleagues. And the only thing I want you to do, I've promised you that this is how I'm going to relate to you. But I want you to promise me that this is also how you are going to treat your subordinates. And that I can control everything that's happening from my level down, because I was relatively senior person. But I cannot control the things that happen above me. But what you have to promise me today is that those things that are happening below you must reflect this oasis of excellence. And I didn't stop there. I also began to engage my peers and my superiors to tell them, debate those abnormalities that they have normalized. And I'm sure in some cases it didn't go exactly well, because they would think that you have become less ambitious, you have gone to other African countries, you have changed, maybe there's something. But trust me that with time, you realize that the supremacy of ideas will prevail. It becomes easier if you are not the only one pushing for that oasis of excellence, because the idea is that we have several oases of excellence that at some point will begin to connect in concentric circles. Let us create oases of excellence everywhere we go, because ultimately those oases of excellence will lead to a revolution of excellence. Thank you.